Teaching is the only profession I know where you're expected to project complete certainty in front of people who need certainty, even when you're not certain. To be calm in front of people who need calm, even when you're anxious. Or to fully show up for the human beings in your room, even when you're quietly wondering whether you're really ready for all this. And here's what I know after years of working as a teacher, beside teachers at every stage in their careers. Almost every teacher who has ever seemed certain has also been nervous. And the ones who do it well, the ones who make their students feel completely safe, are almost always doing it while carrying more uncertainty than anyone in the room knows. Welcome to Show Me the Math Receipts. I'm Asali Smith, founder of Number Navigators, and this is day 3 of Teacher Appreciation Week. Today, we're going to talk about 2 educators who shaped me in completely different ways and who together somehow gave me the 2 things that every educator needs to survive and grow in this profession: permission to not have all the answers, and the demand to bring evidence for the ones you do have. So Miss Nancy Sargent, because I think that's what her name was. Do we ever know what our teachers' first names are? My kindergarten teacher. And Mr. Riley, my 7th and 8th grade science teacher. The man who may have been slightly terrified that I was going to be like my big brother. He turned out just fine, by the way. Let's get into it. Now, before we get into the stories, I want to name something that doesn't get said often enough about the teaching profession. Education has always asked teachers to be more than they were trained to be. That's something we know. But what it has asked in recent years, particularly in the years since the pandemic, fundamentally altered what it means to be a student. It has reached levels of complexity and emotional weight that we are still reckoning with to this day. Teachers became mental health first responders without being trained as mental health professionals. They held communities together during a period of profound community disruption. They walked back into classrooms full of students who had experienced 2 years of interrupted development, wider learning gaps, deeper anxiety. The needs had multiplied. And the expectation was that things would return to normal quickly, without adequate support, without sufficient time. Teachers didn't get to really process what had happened. They just got back to work. And they did it, most of them, while carrying their own uncertainty about whether they're doing it right, whether they were enough, whether the work was landing the way it needed to. Now, Miss Sargent, she carried that uncertainty in 1970, standing in front of a group of kindergartners. I was one of those kindergartners. And she showed up beautifully anyway. When you are 5 years old, or maybe 4, I think I was when I started senior kindergarten. When you are 4 years old or 5 years old, your kindergarten teacher is one of the most enormous human beings you have ever encountered. Not in size, of course, in presence, in the sheer overwhelming authority of them standing at the front of the room that represents your entire known world on your very first day of school. Now, Miss Sargent seemed to know everything. She seemed, to have been doing this forever. She moved through the classroom, with confidence, with warmth and a sense of purpose that made the whole classroom and the whole terrifying experience of being in school for the very first time seem manageable, like we all belonged and it was safe. I did not know at 4 or 5 years old that she was just as nervous as I was. I found out later when I visited her as a teacher myself, the way you find out things about the adults who shaped you through time and hindsight and conversations that happened long after the classroom is a memory. Miss Sargent was nervous. Teaching young children is its own particular kind of demanding. And the stakes feel enormous because the children are so young and they're so trusting and so completely dependent on you to get it right. And nobody feels entirely ready for that. But here is what Miss Sargent did with that nervousness. She showed up anyway. She walked into the classroom. She she met the children, she did the work, and she did it in a way that made this 4-year-old girl feel completely safe, which means she was doing something extraordinarily well. That is the thing about teaching that I don't think gets said enough. Confidence in a classroom is not the absence of fear, but it's the decision to show up in spite of it. Now, let me tell you about a teacher who was possibly slightly terrified of me before I walked in the classroom, having had my brother 10 years before me. My seventh and eighth grade science teacher, Mr. Riley, he taught my brother. My brother's 10 years older than me. My brother, who I would say, I'm saying this with love, was viewed as a troublemaker. I'm not saying he was. So when I arrived in Mr. Riley's classroom a decade later, I came with a reputation that maybe I didn't personally earn. And Mr. Riley looked at me with a particular wariness, of a teacher who's been down this road before. And then he made a decision that as a class, he was going to make us prove everything. 2 words: deployed complete consistency, regardless of what I said or what any student in the room said, regardless of how obvious something seemed, regardless of how evident the claim appeared to be. Prove it. I could say that the sky is blue. Prove it. I could say water is wet. Prove it. I could say anything, and Mr. Riley would look at me with that look that science teachers, have perfected across generations and say those 2 words: prove it. At first, I was infuriated. I was a young person that was just kind of used to having her observations accepted at face value. And suddenly here was this man who refused to take my word for anything, who wanted evidence, who wanted demonstration, who wanted the thing itself rather than my description of the thing. And then something shifted because I started to understand what he was actually asking. He wasn't doubting me, which is what I thought at first. He was actually teaching me the most important intellectual habit that I would ever develop. A claim without evidence is just an opinion. The difference between an opinion and a truth is the willingness to prove it. So now I also have to tell you about the microscope because this story is really not complete without it. I'm ashamed to say I was a nail biter and had been for years. And I think Mr. Riley noticed. He didn't lecture me. He didn't send a note home. He simply one day, in this really quiet, deliberate way that some of the best teachers do things, he invited me to look at something under the microscope. We took what we scraped from underneath my nails and we looked at it together. I'm going to leave the details to your imagination, but I will tell you this: I have not bitten my nails since. That is experiential learning at its absolute best. It wasn't a lecture. It wasn't a warning. It was an experience, a direct, visceral, unforgettable encounter with evidence that made the case more powerfully than any words ever could. Mr. Riley did not tell me to stop. He showed me why, and that is the difference between a teacher who delivers information and one who creates transformation. Now, here is what Miss Sargent and Mr. Riley taught me about mathematics education. Miss Sargent, she taught me that showing up nervous and doing it beautifully anyway is one of the most powerful things a teacher can model. Because mathematics classrooms are full of students who are nervous, who feel uncertain, who are not sure they're ready for what's in front of them. And the teacher who walks in carrying their own uncertainty and chooses to be present anyway is showing every student in the room what to do with fear. You feel it, and then you do the work anyway. Mr. Riley, he taught me that prove it is the most important phrase, even in mathematics education. Not because students should feel interrogated, but because mathematics, like real mathematics, is built entirely on proving things, on evidence, on the willingness to show your work, not just because the teacher asked, but because the work itself is where the truth lives. When we ask students to explain their thinking, when we ask them why a strategy works rather than just whether it works, we're asking them to prove it. We're building classrooms where evidence matters, where the receipt is the thing. Show me the math receipts. That is what Mr. Riley was saying to me in 7th grade, 20 years or maybe more before I had any idea what this podcast was going to be called. Miss Sargent, larger than life, and just as nervous was such a gift. And Mr. Riley, proven it. 2 words that changed everything I ever believed about evidence and thinking and what it really, really means to know something. These 2 teachers gave me the permission and demand in the same experience. One saying, it's okay to not be certain. And the other saying, certainty requires evidence. And somehow, together, they gave me exactly what I needed as I became a teacher myself. It's time for the giveaway. So, of course, to enter today's giveaway, you're going to fill out the form in the description and share this episode. Tag a teacher who has made you prove it, who raised your thinking by refusing to accept less than your best evidence. Use the hashtag #ShowMeTheMathReceipts, and then tomorrow I'll announce today's winner. So today's winner is, drumroll please, congratulations, you absolutely deserve it. We'll be in touch to get all of your information. Now, I want you to come back tomorrow. We're continuing this week with educators who walked beside me, not above me, the ones who started where I started, and the one who opened up her home to me. My name is Asali Smith, and this is Show Me the Math Receipts. And until next time, teach boldly, protect student thinking, and always keep your math receipts.
It's time for Math Joke of the Day. Why was math class so long? Because the teacher kept going off on a tangent. But I'm punching.